Once upon a time, in a small village overlooking the vast blue sea, a woman lived with her fisherman husband and their only son. They lived in complete happiness, and their simple home was full of love and warmth. The woman managed the household affairs with wisdom and patience, while the husband sailed every morning in his simple boat to earn a living from the bounties of the sea. The son would accompany his father on fishing trips, learning from him the secrets of the sea and its waves. But as life goes, happiness does not last forever. One day the husband fell seriously ill, causing great distress for the family. When the doctor was brought, he informed them that the father's illness was incurable. The wife and son felt deep sorrow, especially since they were helpless to aid the husband. After some days, the fisherman felt his end approaching and the weight of time heavy on his heart. He called for his son, who came immediately and sat beside him, holding his hand with tears welling in his eyes. The father looked at him with eyes shining with love and concern, and with a faltering voice, he began to entrust him with the care of his mother. He said, "My son, my time has come, and your mother has no one in this world but you. I want you to be as devoted to her as the hoopoe is to its mother. Carry her with you wherever you go, and do not be ashamed of her, even if women flee from her presence." He took solemn oaths from him, and the son pledged sincerely and faithfully to be devoted to his mother in all circumstances. The mother listened to the words of her husband and son, her tears falling silently. She was wise and understood that life would become more difficult, but she was also strong and capable of facing the hardships of the world. After the father finished his will, the mother looked at her son with tenderness and said, "I will not leave you as long as I live. We will face this life together and always stand side by side." Those moments were filled with deep emotions and feelings, making the mother and her son an unbreakable bond. It marked the beginning of a new journey full of challenges. The next day, the poor fisherman died, leaving his son in the care of his wife. The atmosphere in the cottage became gloomy, but the mother did not succumb to grief and decided to help her son with all her strength. Being a beautiful woman, many men proposed to her, but she firmly rejected them all, saying, "I have dedicated my life to my son." She found herself facing life's difficulties alone, with only a small boat that her husband used to earn a living from the sea. She considered selling it to secure their daily sustenance, but in a moment of inspiration, she decided to take a different path. She knew that her son was unaware of the hardships and struggles of life, and wanted him to learn to face his destiny with courage. She took her son to their neighbor, a wise fisherman with extensive experience in the secrets of the sea. She said to him, "This is my son, and I want you to teach him the ways of fishing until he masters the craft." The kind neighbor accepted her request with open arms and began teaching the boy the secrets of fishing and the art of dealing with the mysterious sea. The boy learned quickly and showed great enthusiasm, as he already knew a little about fishing from his father. When he felt capable of fishing on his own, he returned to his mother and proudly told her what he had learned. His mother gave him his father's boat and said to him, "You must now earn your living with your own hands and provide for both of us." So John would set out every morning in his father's boat, sailing the vast, endless sea, catching fish. By noon, he would return to the town market to sell his catch and use the money to buy household necessities. He would return to his mother happy with what he had achieved. This continued for several months until one day John went out fishing, but unfortunately, caught only one fish. He felt a great disappointment, but also craved to eat the fish with his mother instead of selling it. When he returned home, he entered and said to his mother, "I only caught this one fish today, and I crave it. Please, mother, prepare it so we can eat it." His mother did not blame him, but accepted what God had provided. She cleaned the fish, and when she split its belly, she found a large, shiny pearl inside. She was overjoyed and hid it, not telling her son what she had found. That pearl marked the beginning of a significant transformation in their lives. However, the wise mother chose to keep it a secret until the right time to use this heavenly gift. At that moment, she was thinking about her son's future and how he could use this opportunity to improve their lives. The next day, John returned from the sea with plenty of fish. He quickly went to the town market, sold all he had, and bought some necessities. On his way back, he glanced at the balcony of the governor's palace and saw a beautiful girl, as lovely as the moon, sitting with a sad expression on her face. John was smitten by her and thought about her all the way home. It was the first time he considered marriage. However, to his misfortune, she was the governor's daughter. When he reached home, his mother noticed he was distracted and not his usual self. When she asked him about it, he told her everything that had happened after seeing the governor's daughter. His mother said to him, "My son, you have become a man, and my wish is to see you married and happy." He responded with respect, "But how will the governor's daughter accept me when I am a simple fisherman, barely earning our daily bread?" His mother looked at him with great confidence and said, "Do not worry, my son. Leave it to me." That evening, she went to her neighbor and inquired about the governor and his daughter. Learning much about them, she also found out that there was a house for rent near the governor's palace. When she returned home, she told her son, "We must leave this cottage and move to a better house so that when I propose for you, they will accept you." He replied, "As you wish, mother." She said, "Then we shall leave tonight, and by morning we will be in our new home." They quickly moved to the house next to the governor's palace, renting it for a modest amount. The house was adjacent to the great palace wall, almost like a small prison, and no one desired it. In the morning, the mother, dressed in old, ragged clothes, disguised herself as an old woman and covered her head, carrying a sack filled with stones and sand. She headed towards the governor's palace, as she had heard that his daughter was afflicted with grief and despair. Not accepting anyone, she reached the palace and began shouting, "Whose bird is this? Whose bird is this?" The governor's daughter heard her from her palace window, and her curiosity was piqued. She called down to the old woman and asked, "What bird? You have no bird with you." The old woman replied, "Come down, my dear, and I will read your fortune." Intrigued, the governor's daughter came down and saw the old woman had spread a piece of cloth on the ground, arranging stones in different shapes around it. She seated the princess in front of her and said, "You feel distressed and troubled, my dear, and only this bird flying around you can open your heart." She picked up a stone from the middle of the cloth and said, "This is the bird." When the governor's daughter could not understand the old woman's meaning, the woman did not explain, but instead packed the cloth and stones into her sack and bid the princess farewell, leaving her puzzled and intrigued by the old woman's mysterious words and actions, the princess returned to her palace, feeling more melancholic than before due to the old woman's words. Meanwhile, the mother returned home, filled with joy and excitement, having succeeded in the first step of her clever plan. When her son John saw her happiness, he asked about the reason, and she told him he would know everything in due time. Days passed slowly for the fisherman's son John, as he hoped his dream would come true, trusting in his mother's ability to achieve the impossible. One day, the mother, dressed in her finest clothes, simply and elegantly adorned, and went to the governor's palace, their closest neighbor. She knocked on the palace gate, and the governor's daughter, the sole child of her father, was sitting in her usual place on the palace balcony, eager to see the old woman who had spoken to her about the bird that would free her from her loneliness and distress. When she saw the woman, she allowed her in, as the mother appeared in a new guise, different from the first time. The princess asked the woman, "Who are you, my lady?" The woman answered with a mysterious smile, "I am a stranger to your land. Now I live in that house adjacent to your palace. My son is a pearl trader. We forgot the pearl scale in our city. If you have a scale, please lend it to us so we can weigh some pearls, and I will return it immediately after use." The governor's daughter responded with love and dignity. "Of course, I will bring you the scale." She entered the palace and returned with the scale. The woman took the scale back to her house, brought some glue, and stuck the large pearl she had found in the fish to one of the scales pans. She returned the scale an hour later to the governor's daughter. When the princess noticed the large, shiny pearl, she called out to the woman, "Aunt, look, one of the pearls has stuck to the scale." The woman smiled and said, "Fortune works in mysterious ways, my dear. Since it has stuck to the scale, it is a gift for you." The princess tried to refuse the gift, but the woman insisted. She bid her farewell and returned home. The princess stood there, contemplating, holding the scale and the pearl in her hand, lost in her thoughts. She realized that there was something special about this woman, and felt that the pearl was not just a gift, but the beginning of a bigger story waiting to be told. After a few days, the woman knocked on the governor's palace gate again. The princess came out to greet her with a smile and hospitality, inviting her in. But the woman appeared embarrassed and kept apologizing with various excuses, showing great hesitation. The princess gently encouraged her to speak and say what she needed. The woman, scratching her head and moving her hands nervously, finally said in a troubled voice, "By God, my dear, I am ashamed." The governor's daughter responded kindly, "Don't be ashamed, Aunt. Tell me what you need." The woman sighed and said, "As you know, my son is a pearl trader, and we are travelers. We decided to stay in this town for 2 or 3 days. However, my son's reputation as a trader spread quickly, and one of your local pearl traders came to buy some pearls. Unfortunately, after the deal was done, my son found that he was a bit short. He was too embarrassed to tell the trader, so he sent his servant to bring a bag of pearl from his store in our city. But the servant is delayed, and the trader will come to collect the pearls tonight. I thought to myself that I could borrow some pearls from your father's treasury and return them as soon as the servant arrives with our bag of pearls." Without hesitation, the princess replied, "Don't apologize or feel embarrassed. I will bring you some pearls to complete your son's deal." The princess disappeared for a while, then returned with a white handkerchief containing some sparkling pearls. She handed the handkerchief to the woman, who thanked her profusely and made her promise not to tell the governor about this. The governor's daughter agreed, and the woman's joy was as if a huge burden had been lifted off her heart. She left the palace, feeling relieved and grateful to the kind princess. The pearls in the handkerchief gleamed as the woman counted them, feeling like she was holding an invaluable treasure. Those pearls were not just pearls, but another step towards improving her and her son's lives. When she returned home, carrying the white handkerchief, her son asked about her happiness. She replied, "Your wedding day to the governor's daughter is near, so prepare for this moment." The son could not believe what his mother was saying. He hugged and kissed her, laughing out loud. Days passed, and the woman knocked on the governor's palace door, requesting to meet him. When asked about the reason, she did not disclose it and insisted on her request until the governor allowed her to enter. When she met him, she began to talk about her son's intelligence and success in business, which had earned him a great reputation. She told the governor, "I found nothing that honors me and makes me prouder of my son than to marry him to your daughter." The governor thought deeply before answering, remembering his daughter, who had not recovered from her constant sadness. She was always isolated and not open to the world, living in a state of withdrawal and pessimism. He thought to himself that if he married her off, she might come out of her state and embrace life. He asked the woman to give him some time to consult his daughter. The woman said, "Leave this matter to me if you agree to the marriage, sir." She asked for permission to sit with the princess, and he agreed, puzzled by this woman. However, all that occupied his mind was for the princess to come out of her depression, and he had no problem with her marrying a well-off pearl trader. The woman entered the princess's room, laughing and cheerful. She said, "I had a vision about you and hope you are its subject." Curiosity arose in the princess's heart, and she wanted to know about the vision. The woman approached her, hugged her, and smiled, saying, "After I collected the pearl and returned home, I told my son about your story. He was overjoyed and kept asking me about you until I told him about your manners, duty, and kindness. Then I went to sleep and saw in my dream a green bird descending from the ceiling, fluttering, telling me to go and propose for my son. I asked the bird, 'Propose to whom?' It replied, 'To the girl who gave you a white handkerchief. She will bear children for your son.' I said, 'She is a princess, the governor's daughter, and my son is a foreign trader. How will she agree to him?' The bird told me to say, 'This is your fate and his. If God wills, you will both agree.' The princess was surprised at the idea of marrying someone she had never seen or known, and who was not a prince, but she remembered the fortune teller's story that she would marry a young man who would come to her like a bird from the sky and would take her out of her distress and trouble. So she agreed to the marriage. The woman hurried to the governor, carrying joyful news and a precious dowry. She informed him of the princess's consent to the marriage and presented him with a white handkerchief full of pearls as a dowry for his daughter. He did not know that the pearls originally belonged to him. The governor was delighted with this happy news and announced a grand wedding celebration attended by everyone far and wide. The celebration lasted for 7 days and nights. On the 7th day, the princess joined the young man who had taken over part of the governor's palace, claiming he needed some time to establish their new home, fitting for the princess's status, and gather his business from his city. Days and weeks passed in this manner, and the young man John lived happily with the governor's daughter, who admired him greatly for his high morals and filial piety. His mother frequently visited him, assuring him that their situation would be better than before. However, he often thought about how to prepare a luxurious house for the princess. One day, his mother came to him and told him that the house would be ready in a week. When he asked how this would happen, she smiled and said, "Don't worry, my son, about your mother. I have married you to the governor's daughter. Will I struggle to prepare a luxurious house for my son? The house is already available." John shouted at the top of his voice, "Mother, the mountain palace is haunted by jinn, and no one dares to enter there. Please, Mother, we don't need this house. Death is easier for me than living there." His mother smiled again and said, "I told you not to worry. I don't think jinn live there. I will do what I see fit. Don't worry, my son." She gave him a reassuring look that calmed his heart, which was about to leap out of his chest from fear of what he had heard. She left, promising him that he and the governor's daughter would move to their new home. The daughter had been asking him about their house. Several days passed, and John lived in anxiety over what his mother had told him. One day, as he was sitting on the palace balcony, he saw his mother from afar. He ran to her swiftly and, upon reaching her, kissed her head and asked, "Please, Mother, what happened?" His mother sighed and said, "Starting tomorrow, the palace will be yours." John said, "I am very scared of this, Mother, and I fear the mountain palace greatly." His mother replied, "Calm down and come with me to see what happened." They went to the palace garden. His mother began to recount what had happened to her. She said, "My son, there have been many rumors and stories about the mountain palace, including that it is inhabited by jinn. Everyone who went to the palace saw strange things that defied reason, so I decided to see for myself. I went to the mountain palace in the afternoon and found it completely deserted, with nothing noteworthy. I spent hours examining the place, and everything seemed fine. I fell asleep from exhaustion in one of the corridors when I sat down to rest. I didn't know how long I had slept. I woke up to terrifying screams and shouts. I really thought the palace was haunted. I approached the sound cautiously and found some thieves talking and laughing among themselves. I realized that they were the ones scaring anyone who came to the palace, so it would remain a haven for them, and no one would dare approach. All the rumors people spread were started by them to stay safe. I stayed in my place without making any noise and observed the place all night. At dawn, the thieves dispersed for their daily work of highway robbery and stealing from people. I found gold and money in one of the rooms, which they did not lock because they were confident no one would dare enter the palace. Itham listened to his mother with great fear. His mother continued, "I hid some of the money and gold after digging a deep hole. Then I went to the city police and told them the truth about what was happening at the mountain palace. At first, they did not believe me, but I led them there while the thieves were busy robbing people. The police chief devised a cunning plan by disguising the police officers in the palace. When the thieves returned loaded with gold and money, the police quickly arrested them, leaving them stunned and unaware of what was happening. They had felt completely safe. The police then confiscated all the gold and money. I asked the police chief to let me own the palace since it was abandoned and had no owner. He naturally agreed because I had helped them. The next day I returned to the palace, retrieved the money and gold I had hidden, and return to the city. I bought everything the palace needed and hired many workers to clean and arrange it until it was better than ever. I came to you today to tell you that starting tomorrow, you and your wife can move into your palace." Itham was amazed by his mother's cunning and hugged her tightly, saying, "What would I do without you, Mother?" His mother smiled and said, "Don't worry about your mother, my son." She pulled out a pouch containing some pearls and said, "This trust must be returned to your wife." He took it and rushed back to his wife to tell her they would move to their palace. The next day, he gave her the pouch of pearls, saying, "This is a trust from my mother." The princess was delighted with her husband's words and thanked him greatly for his care. In the morning, a luxurious carriage awaited Hitham and his wife at the palace gate, pulled by four purebred horses, with a finely dressed driver waiting for orders. Hitham and his wife bid farewell to the governor and headed to the carriage, where John's mother awaited them inside. She welcomed them warmly, and the carriage set off for the mountain palace. There, Hitham saw wonders, maids and workers everywhere, working diligently and energetically as if the palace were a paradise. The princess was overjoyed with her palace and praised her husband, hugging him tightly and saying, "I never imagined you own such a magnificent palace." Hitham looked at his mother with gratitude, and she nodded, indicating she would do anything for her son. The three lived in the palace happily for many weeks. One day, while Hitham was sitting in his room with his wife, he accidentally dropped a glass that shattered on the floor. As Hitham was about to call a servant, his wife said, "Don't worry, my dear husband, I will clean it up." She took a broom and started gathering the broken pieces. While she was busy with her task, the young man watched her and remembered his simple past and his new life with the governor's daughter. He laughed heartily, which aroused the princess's curiosity. She stood astonished by her husband's laughter and asked him the reason. He remained silent, which made her more determined. She thought he was laughing at her and swore not to speak to him again until he told her the reason. The young man tried in every way to please her, but finally had to confess. He said, "I was thinking about how the governor's daughter sweeps with a straw broom, while in my home the broom is made of gold." The princess was amazed by his words and insisted on seeing this wondrous house and the golden broom. Confusion filled the young man's heart, and he felt anxious. He had no choice but to turn to his mother for help in resolving the predicament he had gotten himself into. His mother calmly and thoughtfully said, "We don't have enough gold to make a broom of gold, but we must leave the palace tomorrow. God will take care of us." The next day, John told his wife that they would go to his house outside the city. It was an opportunity for him to manage his businesses and trade there, to sell and then return to the palace. Deep down, he trusted his clever mother. They passed by the governor to bid him farewell, and he gave them precious gifts. Each of them rode their horse and left the city. Their caravan traveled from town to town, and the princess didn't know where they were headed. The young man grew increasingly anxious, fearing he might lose his wife. Whenever they approached a city or village, the princess would ask, "Have we arrived?" He would answer, "No, not yet," then whisper nervously to his mother, "What do we do now, Mother?" His mother would reassure him, saying, "God will take care of it." Finally, they arrived at a water well, and their horses were thirsty. They stopped to fill their water supplies. While there, the mother overheard a conversation between two nearby women. One said, "Have you heard about the old merchant?" The second replied, "The old merchant who lives in the big closed palace and doesn't visit anyone or go out to anyone." The first woman said, "Yes, him." "What about him?" The other answered, "His servants say he is dying." The first woman responded sorrowfully, "I wish I were his daughter. All the money, jewels, and gold he has will go to strangers." The mother moved away a bit, pretending to unload a burden from her horse, and asked the two women for help. As they came to assist, she began talking about the loneliness and alienation that kept her away from her father and his palace. Her words were moving and touched the two women, who then started helping her and guiding her to the old merchant. One of them asked, "Are you from around here?" The mother confidently replied, "I am the daughter of the merchant whose palace is nearby." The other woman hesitantly said, "I fear I may upset you, madam." The mother smiled and asked, "Why would you upset me?" The woman replied, "I heard your father is dying, and I don't know if you will make it in time." The mother showed emotion and pretended to cry, and the two women comforted and consoled her. She asked them to accompany her to her father's palace, as she couldn't bear the shock alone. She also told them that her son had married the governor's daughter and didn't want the bride's arrival to bring bad omens to the palace. The two women agreed to accompany her. The mother asked her son and his wife to stay in place until she sent for them. She asked the two women to precede her, and she would follow. When they arrived at the palace, one of them pointed to the closed doors and said, "No one has entered through these doors since I can remember." The young man's mother boldly knocked on the door, and a servant appeared. She cried out, "How is my father? I heard he is dying." One of the servants replied sadly, "My condolences, madam. He passed away a few hours ago. If you had arrived a little earlier, you might have seen him." The mother burst into tears, and the two women comforted her. They asked to inform the villagers about the old merchant's death so they could offer their condolences. The mother agreed and entered the palace. The servants pointed her to where her father lay. She saw keys hanging from his neck, took them carefully, and hid them. She called for the servants to bring the washer to prepare for her father's burial. She sent the servant who had opened the door to the well to bring her son and his wife, the governor's daughter. The mother opened the storerooms and found vast amounts of money and great treasures. She was overjoyed, feeling as if she had found a treasure buried in the ground. When her son arrived, she told him everything and said, "Be strong, my son, and receive the condolences as if the deceased was your grandfather whom you never met. Let everyone know you are the governor's son-in-law." The news of the great merchant's death spread like wildfire, and people from all over came to offer their condolences. After the days of mourning passed, the mother opened the gold store and took out a large amount, handing it to her son. She told him to find a blacksmith in the city and ask him to craft a golden broom. Meanwhile, the governor's daughter was eager to see the golden broom, but out of respect for her grieving husband and mother-in-law, she did not ask for it. After a few days, the golden broom was ready. The young man carried it to his wife and said, "Here is the broom I told you about." The princess admired it, her eyes shining with the gold's brilliance. She said, "I never believed there could be someone richer than my father until I saw the wonders in your grandfather's palace." She felt her husband's deep love and dedication to making her happy. After some time, the mother sold the palace and all its contents. She took the treasures, loaded them into a carriage, and before leaving the city, distributed a lot of money to the poor. They all returned to their mountain palace. A few months later, the wife realized she was pregnant. The husband and his mother were overjoyed. When the child was born, John sat with his wife and said, "I want to tell you a secret, but I fear you will be angry and leave me." The wife, surprised, asked, "What is it, my dear husband?" Despite his hesitation, the young man felt he needed to tell his wife everything. He began recounting all that had happened to him and his mother. The governor's daughter listened, her mouth agape in astonishment. When he finished, the wife remained in disbelief. Suddenly, she burst into laughter, which continued for a long time until tears streamed from her eyes. She said, "How clever your mother is, my dear husband. She did all that for me." John smiled at her and said, "Forgive me, my love. I fell in love with you at first sight." The wife continued laughing and said, "Don't let the governor find out or he'll kill us all." John's mother arrived, drawn by the sound of her daughter-in-law's laughter. Seeing her son's face, she realized he had told her everything. The wife hugged her mother-in-law and said, "You are so clever, Madam. Thank you for everything you did for me." The mother smiled and wanted to say something, but the wife interrupted, saying, "Don't worry, the governor will never know what I heard." She left the room, laughing loudly. They all prepared for the governor's visit to see his grandson. When the governor arrived with lavish gifts, they welcomed him warmly. He was amazed by the beauty and splendor of the palace. He hugged his daughter, carried and kissed his grandson. He thanked John for everything he had done for his daughter. The young man lived in immense happiness, grateful for his mother's wisdom and cleverness in handling matters. Their days were filled with joy and contentment, as he always heeded his mother's advice and benefited from her wisdom, leading to a peaceful and stable life.